Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of MAPS, otherwise known as the Michael and Patty Show. I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
And aren't you looking swell today?
Yes, it's actually a very nice summer or spring day outside. I had a birthday. I love the spring season.
Well, happy birthday. You must be, at least 35?
Yeah, we'll go with that. Thank you.
Awesome. We're coming to you live from the Charlottetown waterfront overlooking the Hillsborough River from Victoria Park. If you're looking for a great place to sit and daydream, this is probably it.
This is one of my favorite locations to go for a walk, is along the Victoria Park Boardwalk, downtown Charlottetown.
Well, let's get into it. We're going to start off with the stats for March. This podcast is recorded in advance, usually about a month or so. And we get the stats a little late, usually a couple weeks into the next month. But regardless, the numbers are pretty similar. Home sales in March are up by 13.5%, which numbered 160 units in March 2025, up 13.5 compared to the 141 sold in March 2024.
The market currently is in a balanced market. The end of March 2025, the market was well balanced, favoring neither buyers nor sellers.
So it's been bouncing back and forth. It's basically converted to a buyer's market. Sometimes it's slightly in favor of the sellers, but don't let it go to your head.
Yeah, it depends on where your property is situated on the island as well, when you get a little more hyper-local, as to whether or not it is strictly a balanced market or if it is teetering or in favor of the sellers at this time.
And we're still seeing a lot of overpriced listings because they still think it was 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, and a lot of them still want to price their properties based on 2021's inflated COVID numbers when we had such a migration to the island from all across Canada, and those numbers don't exist anymore.
New listings are up 10.1%, 317 new listings, up 10.1 from 288 listings added in March of 2024. I think you're going to see a lot more listings coming on the market, as you usually do, but specifically because the weather has been so nice the beginning of this year. So April, May, you're going to see a ton of new listings.
Yeah, usually in April, we still have a bit of snow, and I think for the most part, there's not much snow, if none, in most areas of the island now.
Benchmark price. This is what a typical house would sell for in PEI. It's up 1.5%. The benchmark price was $367,000 in March 2025, up 1.5% from $361,500 in March 2024. Anything to add to that before we move on to the joke portion of the podcast?
No, that seems pretty consistent with what I'm finding.
The other day I was looking at realtor jokes and I came across this and I thought, this is pretty funny, educational, entertaining in the same. Okay. A lawyer that had 12 children was in a tight bind because his rental agreement was coming to an end and he was looking for a new home. He could not easily find one because no one wanted a tenant with 12 children that would most likely destroy the home. Since he was a lawyer, he could not easily lie about his family situation. So on the day a new real estate agent came to meet up with him, he told his 11 children and his wife to go to the cemetery. During the interview, the real estate agent asked, "How many children do you have?" He answered truthfully, 12. Seeing he had only one beside him, the agent curiously asked, "Where are the rest then?" The lawyer answered with a sad look, "They're in the cemetery with their mother."
That's bad.
And that's how his agreement was signed, and he was able to rent a new home without lying.
That's really bad.
And this is thanks to Stephen, I don't even know how you pronounce that. Keighery, Keighery, home buyer in Louisiana.
Thank you, Stephen. That's quite dry, but
excellent story. Moving along, in one of the last podcasts recently, we're discussing the wonderful FINTRAC program we have here in Canada, which, from what I've read, is probably a product of international pressure put on countries to stop money laundering. I've always wondered how effective this program is because, how do you put it assertively? It seems like a bunch of nonsense because if someone was laundering money, wouldn't they just go to the money laundering site and know what the government's looking for so they can avoid being above the radar?
Yeah, and if you're a realtor and you realize you have a criminal sitting in front of you, I think most may just end up choosing not to work with that individual so they're not affiliated or associated with them. Or if they're too far into the transaction, I wouldn't want them to know that I'm aware that they're a criminal, so therefore my life is at risk.
I've always wondered how many criminals have been caught through this program. Because as we know, anything the federal government does, they do well and cost effectively. So here's the stats. Well, funny thing is, FINTRAC doesn't have any stats. Comprehensive statistics on the number of money launderers prosecuted as a result of FINTRAC's efforts are not readily available. Isn't that great? Like setting up a company, how much are you making? Oh, it doesn't matter. We don't keep track of those stats. We could be losing millions or gaining millions. We're just running the company for something to do. So here's the big numbers. In 2022 and 2023, according to what I could find on the internet, FINTRAC made a whopping 10 disclosures.
All across Canada.
All across Canada in 2 years, 10.
Okay.
And in 2023, 2024, this number increased dramatically. Are you sitting down?
Yes.
So 14. The specific number of prosecutions resulting directly from FINTRAC's intelligence is not specified in publicly available reports. I'd probably want to keep them secret too if I wasn't doing much of a great job there and not catching many criminals. But here's the great part. In the fiscal year 23-24, FINTRAC's approved budget was approximately $120 million for such results, but they don't tell you if they have any results. This represented an increase from the previous year's the budget of a mere, I don't know how they even operated on this shoestring budget, $95.7 million in 22-23, and then before that they had basically a roll of quarters, $90.3 million in 21-22. So there's your program, there's your federal government and our tax money hard at work catching criminals, or maybe not because we don't know what the stats are.
Yeah, but the flip side to look at that is we live in a fairly safe country, and I would rather know we don't have high numbers and cases.
They're not catching them. They don't keep a track of their own stats. And don't you think if somebody handed you $120 million, you might be able to do just as good of a job, if not better?
I would try my best, for sure, to do a phenomenal job.
I think one of the things that one might want to do, and maybe this is an idiotic suggestion, is do your FINTRAC reporting online. So the computer can do all the analysis. Right now, we take the FINTRAC reports, we stuff them in a file, and maybe, or maybe not, we get audited. But that's how FINTRAC works. That's the results that we don't know.
That's actually a really good idea.
I know, it's incredible, isn't it?
Well, for all the money that they're paying, if they were to provide a software program, because they're able to capture, we have the little chips in that in our driver's license and our passports, plus taking a selfie photo to reconcile it, it should be something that the government offers, especially at that amount of money. It
makes way too much sense. Moving along, I received an offer the other day, and keep in mind the average offer in PEI is probably between 10 and 13 pages. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
We have the purchase and sale, we have a Schedule A, and we usually have an agency disclosure. So the purchase and sale is the typical stuff. Schedule A is your typical paragraphs. The third document just tells the purchaser who the agent is working for. So the other day I got an offer from a newer agent that had a copy of the deed, ortho photo, which is like a satellite view of the property, a geolink, which is a map of the property, which clearly says on it not to be used as a legal document, and it may not be accurate, copy of the taxes, the neighbor report, a survey that was a picture of a survey in a closet, a home inspection, which was 57 pages long, and I think they forgot to include their family photos, their vacation photos, and a picture of their home office. Needless to say, this offer was rejected for multiple reasons. The agent was told to go home and do their homework over again, and it came back at 11 pages the next time. The point to this is, and maybe you can explain this better than I can, is anytime you include a document with a purchase and sale, it sounds great in theory. And I know there's brokerages that are preaching this. Oh, include the ortho and the survey and the copy of the deed and this and that and a 57-page home inspection. But what I said to this other agent is every document you attach to a purchase and sale and you indicate on the purchase and sale on page 1, closer to the bottom, what documents are included with that purchase and sale, those documents become bound to that agreement. And if I have 83 pages that are attached to that document, now I have to make sure all of them are correct and there's nothing hidden in them either.
Yeah, the seller, because the buyer writes the contract with their agent, they submit it to the listing agent. The listing agent now presents it to the seller. The seller, again, is mostly going to be concerned with the price and the closing and maybe, on Schedule A, a few of the conditions. And that's really it. They're trusting everything else is all accurate documents. And I know when you brought this forth, Michael, and we had a conversation, a discussion about it, one of the things that you had even mentioned was by putting the deed, because I believe the deed was attached to your particular offer.
Everything was.
Who is to say that somebody didn't go in and alter that, and now the seller is assuming the documentation is correct, whereas perhaps they could have changed the right-of-way, the feet allowed, or they could have done something, some alteration to these documents, as well as the home inspection report. And that's just ridiculous because now the seller has to initial every single page, but also read, acknowledge, and accept every single page. And the condition that the purchaser disclosed the property to be in doesn't seem like a smart decision for a seller to go ahead and sign this contract agreement. So in my opinion, I think you did a great job, or the best thing for your seller client, because that's who you were representing in this whole interaction and transaction, was to just toss it back and say, we're not going to verify every single one of these government documents that you have that specifically states that this may not be accurate. Now they want the seller to say, yes, it is accurate by initialing it. So it's a huge risk. And I am an advocate to have the agreement of purchase and sale, which, yes, includes agency, the agreement itself, Schedule A, if there's a property condition disclosure statement. I do like attaching an ortho geomap just to reconcile the PID number, because sometimes there could be data entry errors. So it does reconcile and make sure my client, if I'm representing the buyer, this is the property they've agreed to purchase. And if there is a survey, but not a picture of a survey, I may attach it, but it should be of that property and not of an adjacent property. That's really all you need in your contract.
Well, the reason they indicated to me that they included the home inspection is because it was a lowball offer. And they felt by including the home inspection, they were using that as a leverage tool so we could acknowledge the home inspection that we paid for and already viewed. However, that sort of backfired as well, because I indicated to the other agent that when we did the CMA on the property, the comprehensive market analysis, which is an agent's equivalent of an appraisal, we kept the home inspection in mind, so that was already priced in to our already discounted price. Yeah, so it didn't work out to their advantage as a negotiating tool.
The home inspection, though, just so that our listeners understand, a home inspector, as much as I'm a huge advocate for them, however, they make recommendations. There may be areas that they're not properly able to inspect, and most times they're not a Red Seal electrician or plumber or carpenter. They give you a broad overview. So if one says there may be potential for mold or something in that area, or should be structurally, it should be looked at. Maybe this property, in their opinion, is showing signs of not being structurally sound. By having your seller initial it, they're accepting and going, yeah, that's exactly right.
Funny you may bring that up, because this particular home inspection had a couple of things in it. One of them was signs of water in the attic on the roof portion. And so they said, well, now we're going to have to fix the roof. The fact is, the roof was just replaced 2 years ago, and this water was a result of the old roof, which needed to be replaced, but it was now replaced. So they were discounting their offer based on that misinformation or misinterpretation. And then the other thing they said, well, the skylights are leaking. Skylights, in fact, are not leaking, but skylights quite commonly will drip with water from condensation, particularly if you're doing a lot of cooking in that. It hits the skylight, it condenses, it turns to water, it drips down the side of the walls around the skylight. It looks like they're leaking, but they're not. So this was their argument to get the price down. And at the end of the day, we sold it for full price.
Good for you. And some listeners, if you're from Ontario, I know in many areas there, the lenders insist on having a copy of the home inspection when a buyer is purchasing it. But here on Prince Edward Island, it is not mandatory to do a home inspection. So therefore, it shouldn't have to be or shouldn't be included as part of your agreement of purchase and sale. Just something to be mindful of. And if the lender sees it and now you've red flagged a bunch of potential issues, which, like in your situation, didn't even exist, you just compromised that buyer's ability to possibly get finance approval for that property.
Well, that's a little bit of a different story, but I will say that these days I'm finding that pretty well 100% of the offers we receive include a home inspection, whereas that wasn't the case 20 years ago. You'd rarely see a home inspection done. The only time you don't see a home inspection today is if you're in a very competitive multiple offer situation. Would you agree or strongly agree with that?
I would agree. I usually, if it's a multiple offer situation and I'm representing the buyer, have a good rapport with a few home inspectors that can come in and spend a quick hour just to do a walkthrough to hopefully ease any concerns that my buyer client has. That can be arranged.
But you're doing this while you're viewing the property,
Correct.
Not after you're offering it, making it a contingency in order to make your offer clean. So you're bringing the home inspector with you on showings or
Correct.
a showing, which is an excellent plan. What do we have here? Can this cottage be winterized and used year-round? We have touched on this, but we're going to touch on it again because more and more people are looking at what are deemed to be cottages as year-round residences. And this is actually a place where you can get some really awesome deals on what could be a great waterfront home, but it's currently being used as a waterfront cottage.
Yeah, it's because of the affordability of these cottages. I mean, the year-round homes are at such an inflated price, especially if they're waterfront or water view. Cottage properties now, people are thinking outside the box, if you will, and I'm looking at my numbers and how much can I put into this to make it something more substantial in a year-round home.
In a lot of cases, cottages are homes. It's just in some cases they may not be insulated underneath, and you can have a home inspector and a contractor or whoever determine whether that particular structure is viable to being year-round. But there's some other things you need to look at as well. You want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say another thing is if the province doesn't service the road.
That's on my list.
Okay, I will be quiet.
Road access. Make sure the road isn't gated. You're not going to see too many gated communities in PEI, but you want to make sure it isn't gated as part of a community. You want to make sure it's accessible. You also want to make sure you're not going to sink to your axles when the frost comes out of the ground, which is not something you would normally know by driving around and looking at the road. Does that cover roads?
If the province doesn't service the road year-round, you may run the risk of not having at your doorstep, at your property, waste pickup during the off-season.
Now you're getting down to my list again. Let's get back to the road. the road makeup has to be sufficient for driving in the spring. If it isn't, you'll be walking down that road. And what I mean by that is most roads are made up of a shale base. They usually have gravel, and then in some cases they'll be paved or they'll have recycled asphalt on top. That's what makes up a road. What I'm talking about, can you physically traverse down the road in the spring? The winter's not going to be an issue, providing you plow the snow or contract someone that will do that. And in a lot of cases, what you can do is you can contract the company that's clearing the main highways, because they're usually subcontractors, and for a fee, most of the time a fairly small fee, they will plow that road. Have you done that before?
Yeah, not with the city. So that's a good, or the highway. That's a good point.
Covenants, make sure there's nothing in the restrictive or protective covenants that preclude you from living there year-round.
Yes, especially if there's like central water system.
Now you're jumping ahead on the list again. Stick to the points. Next is, do you have a water system that's on year-round? In some cases, and again, this is fairly rare where they'll have a central water system that'll turn off, but they do exist on the island. Any comments in regards to water and nothing else?
So, you're good.
Garbage collection. Didn't you mention that before? Yes. You will probably not have garbage collection to your new waterfront home/cottage. However, if you're really nice to the garbage man, I have seen situations where they may just go to the way to help you. Alternatively, you'll be walking to the end of the street or delivering your garbage can to the end of the road. And the same goes with school buses.
School bus service pickup would be not an option if it is not on a year-round road. So again, you would just have to probably walk your children to the end of the laneway for school bus pickup there.
And we covered snow removal. So either going to be doing it yourself or contracting somebody out to do it, or contacting the people that do the government roads to see if you can work a side deal. And of course, road maintenance, that's something you're going to have to take care of, or form some form of pseudo homeowners association so you can collaboratively contribute monetarily to fixing that road.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, you can, yes, turn a cottage into a year-round road. The biggest thing that you need to be looking at is services being provided. How long is the laneway to where the cottage is that you're considering purchasing? And just making sure that you are allowed to based on covenants and that.
And where can I find out if the road that leads to my new cottage that I'm going to turn into a house is a year-round road and is maintained by the government typically from spring to fall?
That is online, that information.
Yes, it is. So you would Google gov.pe.ca seasonal roads or something like that. Can't remember what the document's called, but it is there, and it does specifically spell out each and every road and which road and what portion of a road is maintained by the government. How do you change a road from seasonal to year-round?
Move children down to the subdivision and have...
You can ask the government to do it, but what it turns into is a political situation. So if they maintain your road more, turn your road into year-round, and don't do the neighbor's road, it turns into a political nightmare. I have found it's best to collaboratively work with the government and cut them a check and see if you can sort of work out a deal where you can get that road maintained in a joint effort. Because if you're contributing monetarily to fixing that road and converting it over to a government road, they're much more inclined to listen to you rather than footing the bill for 100% and then having to deal with all the neighbors that want their road brought up to government. Okay, next, I'll let you cover this next one.
So check out online presence of any agent you wish to hire. So if you are a buyer or a seller and you don't know where to start, you've made the decision, I need to move, whether you're buying and moving or whether you're selling and moving, where do I start with regards to looking for a realtor? Yes, you can look for testimonials, reviews, recommendations, referrals from family and friends. However, if you take those names, this is your due diligence portion of the process. And my advice and recommendation would be to look at their online presence, look at their Google reviews, look at if they have a service like Rank My Agent or Real Satisfied. Look at their realtor.ca profile. How complete is that? How much attention to detail have they put in? Their LinkedIn profile is their online resume. Do they have a complete real estate resume showing what their credentials are, what kind of training they've had, how much experience they had in their years of real estate? There's so much information if somebody were to properly utilize their LinkedIn profile, so much information that a consumer would be able to pull from that. So you want to make sure you check their online presence. Check and see if you're a seller, do they have a YouTube presence? Do they have videos that they're using to market, their clients' properties? What kind of marketing representation are they putting together to sell that property? Is it just a walkthrough with them talking and making you end up feeling like you got vertigo? So check online, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or X, Instagram, newsletters, see if you can subscribe, what their website looks like. And there's also a new platform called Threads that you can check out.
I'm not a big believer in the feedback sites because there's a bunch of them out there. I just find feedback is so biased, or if it's not biased, it's friends and family that are in there giving positive comments because the agent's gone out and solicited that. And I find if you don't do that, then the only comments you get are the negative ones, because people that have something positive to say usually don't go out of the way to say it typically, but the negative ones do.
I still say, look and see what their reviews. What are their reviews on Google reviews? Do they even have a Google business page?
I say check out their YouTube, check out their website, check out all their social media. That's where I would start. Next is spring is here. Get the guide, subscribe to the newsletter. Tell us about the visitor's guide and why that's so much of a great idea to obtain. And I don't know if they have the map. I was on the site the other day. You used to be able to order a whole pile of stuff for free and get it shipped to your home address. And one of those things was the provincial map. But I see now the visitor's guide, you can order one or you can just download it online. But it's something you probably want to check out. It has a ton of information on PEI, and it's updated every year.
Yeah, and then it gives you a little bit of information about the lifestyle, perhaps festivals, some of the activities that you could expect to experience. So if you're a buyer looking to relocate to Prince Edward Island, or if you live on Prince Edward Island and you moved here from afar and you're looking to relocate to another community, it is a great guide to be able to explore and see all the great things that Prince Edward Island has to offer. Maybe plan your trip around that. So while you're doing your house hunting, you also take in a few of the fun activities. Because once you move to a community, you tend now to be immersed into the responsibilities of work and paying your bills and grocery shopping and all that fun stuff that you end up missing out on attending some of the festivals. Speaking from experience.
And you can find that by going to PEI Play.
Yeah, it's a great site.
PEIplay.com.
And if I know I have for my clients, and I don't know if you have, Michael.
We're on to the next subject.
I've had clients ask me for packages, and I've gone down and put together little packages on things that I felt they might be interested in, mailed them to them.
Happy birthday, Patty. We need to move on. Rental cars. This will be the time of year when people are going to be booking trips to the island. Do not assume you're going to show up at the Charlottetown International Airport and have 2,000 cars to choose from, because you're not. Rental cars can become a shortage, especially during tourist season, so make sure you book one. I would suggest if you're planning on traveling all over the island, we have a lot of clay roads and sand, dirt roads, mud roads. I would get something that's four-wheel drive and preferably has some clearance. Now, we did talk about this a year or so ago on this podcast. I thought there's about 2 or 3 rental places in Charlottetown. There's actually 19 that came up when I Googled Charlottetown car rentals. And I say Charlottetown opposed to anywhere else because that's typically where you're flying into. Were you aware there's about 19?
I had no idea there was 19.
Well, there you go. When is the sale file sent to the lawyers, and what lawyer do I use?
Okay.
And be quick.
Okay.
We're getting close.
It depends on the closing. If the closing is tight, I would recommend you send the sale file to the lawyer immediately upon having an agreement and the deposit being received, because now the contract is binded, so that the lawyer can schedule in or book in the title search for after the condition's been removed. If you dump it on their plate 2 weeks after all the conditions are done and they have a week or 2 weeks to get title search done, and they may be busy. Who's to say they may be going away on a little holiday or just getting back and now they're a little swamped. I find it a little disrespectful to just dump it on their plate if it's a short closing. If it is not a short closing and it's your standard contract closing, which is around 45 to 60 days, 2 weeks for a condition period. Once that has been removed, usually I time about 3 weeks after that or a week prior to closing for title search. And then that is when the contract is sent to the lawyers immediately after conditions have been removed.
And how do I find a lawyer in one short sentence?
Your agent should be able to help you.
Absolutely. And one thing you might want to do is when you are hiring a lawyer, check out their website so you know who you're dealing with and make sure that they actually do practice in real estate law, not something that's completely unrelated.
Yeah, and hopefully your realtor will be able to advise you if this is an IRAC applicable, whatever skill set is needed as part of the contract agreement. You want to make sure you have a good lawyer to be able to take care of that.
Do I have to be in person to sell or buy a property?
No.
Good answer.
Short and sweet and to the point.
Erosion reports. We mentioned before that if you're curious about how much erosion a property has and may experience based on historical data, you could send in the PID number and they send you back this nice fancy report. I forgot. You sent me the link. I already had that in my bookmarks, but there's actually a live site that you can go into and type in that PID number and it will show you the erosion report live. So it's real time. You don't have to wait for more than a second that it takes you to type in that PID number. And this actually helped you there last week with a gentleman that was looking to buy one or more building lots, and he was picking between two locations. And what was the result of that conversation?
So I sent him the link of the Coastal Hazard Information Platform, which is what the site is. And the lots that he was contemplating between, obviously, one or two I had listed, and then this other subdivision area, which wasn't too far away. And it showed they were at high risk for flooding 2050 to 2100. It was going to end up being underwater, whereas the properties that I was selling were high ground, which I have disclosed in my overview. And it truly is high ground and land that is going to stand the test of time, if you will. It showed the value of some of these free platforms, free sites, government programs, and that they have out there so that a buyer can do their due diligence and research. He's been looking for a couple of years and he's never had a realtor point him in this direction. So he's very grateful and is now looking for a builder. He's looking to offer on one of these lots.
I had an offer come in, and in that offer, they had the standard paragraph that the seller was to uncover the septic tank lid. So in the case of the older septic tanks, they can be buried under the ground by 2 or 3 feet of dirt. So usually you get someone to show up with a shovel or an excavator to remove that dirt. And then I thought to myself, because I never really thought about this, they're going to do their inspection, which basically just means take the lid off, look in the tank and see if it's not cracked, the liquid's there, it's level, all that sort of stuff. But there's no provision in that paragraph to cover the hole back up. So now you got this giant gaping hole when you close the property, and there is nothing in the contract that says that hole has to be covered up, which is kind of interesting how poorly written that contract is, because there should be some indication as to who fills that hole back in. Otherwise, you're going to have this giant hole when you move in.
You're absolutely right, and I never thought of that. it is just assumed.
Because I was thinking, we're not filling the hole back in, and it's not in the contract.
And you were obviously representing the buyer.
The seller.
Well,
we uncovered the hole. The buyer was doing the inspection, and at the point of the inspection, now they have this giant hole in their yard, which we're not responsible for, representing the seller, to fill back in. They would be.
Yeah, but then I just see it as the seller now is going to have to assume responsibility to fill in the hole because it's their property. Now, we're talking septic lids, which are approximately 2 feet by 2 feet. So it's a significant size hole to lift the lid and do the inspection. We're not talking septics that have risers, the green caps that are usually right on the surface of the earth. That would be considered problematic.
Well, here is what I suggested. What I suggested is, since he has the hole uncovered, the septic tank is right there, just put in a riser and a lid on it so you never have to do this again.
And then obviously paid by the seller.
Paid by the buyer.
Okay. It's a good opportunity to pitch it, as long as the buyer's moving forward with purchasing the property, of course.
Well, they were. Because my properties are nothing but the best, the greatest properties ever.
Of course.
I've learned from the new representative there in the States.
Okay.
You'll never see a property like my properties.
Yours are the best.
When is the best time to sell? This is our closing point. Now, because the longer you wait, the more competition you're going to have. You'll typically end up with more money fall to spring, but most people wait until the spring when the grass is green, and now you have 4 competitors on your street. So now is the time to sell. Patty, thank you for joining me today and helping us with this little podcast thing we have going here. Maybe we could just sign off.
Yes. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Michael and Patty Show, otherwise known as MAPS, the Prince Edward Island podcast that helps guide and navigate you through the buying and selling process and a little bit of Prince Edward Island fun facts and information. Until next time, have a great day.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Thanks for listening. Bye for now.